Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jenna and I'm so excited for today's video. I'm going to be sharing my birth story with you. If you're new here, my second daughter was born 2 weeks ago tomorrow, so she's still very brand new. I wrote out everything about my birth story on my phone, so forgive me if I'm looking down a lot, but I just wanted to share my very positive experience this time around. If you've been around for a while, you know my first birth was beautiful, but also it was a little bit traumatic in my healing. I had a 4th degree tear and it was very traumatic in the long run. So I was really hoping for a different experience this time, and I did. I got exactly what I prayed for and exactly what I hoped for. So before we get started, I want to just throw out there that this is my experience, and however you decide to birth your baby or however you did birth your baby is beautiful and wonderful, and you are a superwoman. So a little background on me. Like I mentioned earlier a little bit, my first birth ended in a 4th degree tear, which isn't really necessarily, like, it didn't affect my labor. My labor was very peaceful and very positive. My contractions in my first birth were not ever painful. I didn't feel pain up until baby was crowning. With that birth, I had an unmedicated hospital birth, and it was wonderful up until the time that the staff came in the room. And I don't blame the staff, but I think it just added a lot of stress onto me. When you're doing it unmedicated in a hospital, it makes it a little bit more difficult because I think they're so used to, like, the sequence of events. You know, so a woman comes in labor, they get an epidural, and then they have them deliver on their back, and yada yada yada. Whereas when you're delivering without medication, you feel everything and you can't really choose what you want, I guess. Like, your body just does what it wants to do because it's just giving birth. It's not something you can control. So I think just the stress of them, like, doing what they normally do and what they're used to, mixed with my body just going in a totally different direction, in turn added a lot of, like, adrenaline and stress to me. That was a lot longer of a story than it needed to be. But anyways, I didn't know that birth was traumatic until months later. My recovery was very traumatic too, and a lot of this I didn't realize until this birth. But because of that, I was very nervous to give birth again, just because the injury was very traumatic in itself. If you don't know what a 4th degree tear is, you can look it up. I won't talk about it in this video. But I was very nervous about that happening again, and I was also very nervous about being panicky and, like, out of control again in that transition pushing stage. So overall, I was just very nervous to give birth again. I did decide to do another vaginal birth, even though it was recommended by my OB/GYN that I consider C-section. But I did want to do another vaginal birth because it was sort of like I needed to try again to have, like, a healing experience. Otherwise, the only experience of birth I would have is being scared of it, and I didn't want that to happen. I wanted to sort of, like, prove to myself that I could be in control of my emotions and breathing, and I could be, you know, just have a better experience. So with that, I decided to go to a birthing center, which is the closest thing to a home birth you get without having a home birth. I just knew that if I wanted a more self-led birth, that I had to go somewhere other than a hospital. Now that all those back details are out of the way, let's get into the actual birth story, which is why you're here. Sorry I ramble so much. But on May 3rd, I was 41 weeks exactly, and I had a midwife appointment that day, and I had a non-stress test to make sure that everything was still looking good with the baby because I was a week over. And I hadn't been checked or anything, like, cervically up until this point. So I did ask for a cervical exam just to see, like, what's going on, because with my first I didn't go over. I was 2 days early. So I kind of expected to go right on time again. I had asked the midwife if she thought a membrane sweep would be a good option for, like, maybe kickstarting things. So she said, yes, I seem like a really good candidate for it if I want to. They really don't push anything at the birth center. So I got a membrane sweep, which was not very fun. After my membrane sweep, the midwife said after she did it, she stretched my cervix to a 3. So I was then dilated to a 3. I left and was cramping all day, which they said is normal. It can transfer to contractions or just stop and nothing happened. So I was really crampy, and then they stopped around 6 or 7, and I was like, I'm never gonna have this kid. So then I went to bed, and around 2 I woke up with contractions, and they just felt like the crampiness again, but they were coming in waves. So it was like crampy and then not anything, and then crampy and then not anything, which is totally different than what I remember contractions feeling like with my first birth. But I did decide to start timing them just because I was overdue and I had the membrane sweep, and I was like, I better time them just to see what's going on. They were about 7-ish minutes apart, and they weren't like super uncomfortable. They were, because I had to get in like an all fours position, but they weren't like breathtaking, if that makes sense. So I was like, oh gosh, my back hurts really bad, and it's just uncomfortable. So I'd get into a squatting, like crawling position in bed. And then that went on until like 3:30, and I was like, why aren't they getting stronger or closer? And I was just trying to sleep because I was like, if I go into labor, I want to, have some rest in me. So then they, I think, stopped or got less, because I was able to fall asleep at 3:30 in that like crawling position. But at 5, when I woke up for the day, they were still there. So I don't know if they stopped or if I just got so tired that I slept through them. I was contracting about every 6 minutes at that point. Oh my word. My husband was getting ready to leave for work, and I was like, so I've been having contractions since 2, but they're not getting any stronger. I don't know if you should go in today or what. We decided I'd call the midwife and tell her what was going on, and just see what they thought, because they were so manageable and they were not getting any stronger. But the midwives had told me, since I live so far away from the birth center, to start coming in at 7 minutes apart. So I called, and they said, you should probably have your husband stay home just in case, at least for a few hours, and maybe go on a walk, eat a good breakfast, just move around a lot, and you can pump to see too if that encourages things. So he stayed home, and I was walking up and down the stairs. We walked in our backyard a lot, and I was walking up and down a hill in our backyard. I was doing squats, and I was bouncing on the ball, and I did pump a little bit, but not too much. And then they started to slow down again, and they were like 7 minutes apart or something. And they were only 30 seconds this whole time. So that's why I was like, maybe that's not labor. I don't know. By 10 a.m., they were every 5 minutes apart, and we just decided to go in and get checked because I did not want to risk it, and I was like getting pretty uncomfortable just having these contractions that weren't progressing at all. And I thought maybe if we went in, they could do another sweep or like do the Foley bulb induction thing. So I did decide to go in. We dropped off our daughter at her grandma's house, and on our way there, I had my first like big contraction, and I was like, oh, okay, it's a good thing that we're going in now, because that was a real big one. I had a couple more of those like on the way to her grandma's house, and then when we were driving to the birth center, they kept coming, and I was finally having to like breathe through them. I couldn't talk to my husband during them or like focus on what he was saying. When we did get to the birth center, she checked me, and she's like, you're at a 4. So my contractions were doing something, and I was in labor, but at that point I didn't know it. Like, I still felt like I would never actually go into full active labor. So when she said I was a 4, I was like, oh my gosh, well, now what? Like, am I actually not in labor? Because if I'm not, I don't know how I'm gonna be able to handle real labor, because this is hard already. And so I asked her if she could do another membrane sweep, and she did, and she said she like got me to a stretchy 5, which is like, you're not dilated to a 5, but if they stretched it, you could be at a 5, if that makes sense. And she recommended we stay around the city and just kind of walk around and see if things picked up. If not, go home and see what happens. So we stayed in the city for a while, and this, like right after she did the membrane sweep, things picked up a lot, and they started to come around every 2 minutes apart, and I felt them a lot. They were much more intense than the earlier ones, and I was like, I do not want to walk right now. Like, the membrane sweep itself is so uncomfortable, and then contracting with the like crampiness of the membrane sweep, not fun. But I did walk a little bit. I did some like curb walking. We got some lunch, and we just tried to hang out around there to see what would happen. And again, they were not growing in intensity. They were just like hard contractions, and then I'd get a 2-minute break and I was fine. And then a contraction would come and I was like, oh my gosh, this is really hard and really intense already, and I'm only at a 5. Like, I could not believe I was only at a 5 because this was already way harder work than my first birth. So when we got to the birth center, that was 11 o'clock, and then we walked around for like 2.5 hours, and we got back to the birth center at 1:30 to be checked again, just to see like if baby came down lower or what. And I was checked, and she said I was still like only at a 5. So I dilated to a 5 now, but that's it in 2.5 hours. And she was like, baby is so low, like she doesn't have like any lower to get. Like, your cervix is changing, your contractions are doing something, so don't get discouraged, but you have a couple options. We can have you walk around somewhere around the city. You can take this like anxiety sleeping medication or like supplement that helps you, your contractions sometimes will like stop, and then you'll wake up with energy and you'll go into labor. I don't really know exactly what it was or what she said, but it seems like it was something they give to a lot of women. She gave me my third option was to go home and see what happened. And I was like so sick of it. I was like, I'm not walking around anymore. I'm not gonna take that sleeping medication stuff, and I'm gonna go home. So we decided to go home, an hour trek home, and I was still contracting like very intensely, and in the car is not the easiest place to labor if you've ever been in labor in the car. So when we left the birth center, the contractions seemed to sort of space out a little bit, like 4 minutes apart, maybe 5 minutes apart, but they were like getting harder. So they were like a minute long now, and then 4 to 5 minutes apart. So we agreed that once they were getting closer together again, so it's almost as if like labor was starting all over again, that we would head into the birth center. And I really did not want to go back to the birth center because I was so scared they were going to send us home again, and I wasn't actually in labor. So I was just like trying to do anything to like make myself believe I wasn't in labor, you know, just distracting myself. So we got home and I was exhausted. I was like, I'm going to lay down and try and like, I don't know, just close my eyes or something. And I was able to sleep in 5-minute intervals for 30 minutes. After my nap, I started timing them again, and they were like 3 minutes apart, 1 minute long. And then I ate a like whole package of blueberries, and I ate a bowl of cereal, and I was trying to snack a little bit to like give myself energy to keep going, because I didn't know how long I'd be in this like weird stalled phase. And so then my husband was watching me eat my bowl of cereal, and he's like, I think we better go in. And they always say like the partner is the best judge because they see your demeanor change and everything. And throughout the whole day, I was very calm and very like upbeat, I guess. And then when we were here eating my cereal, like I would stop eating my cereal and just get really quiet and very internalized. And he looked at my timer, and they were like 2 minutes apart, 1 minute long. So they were really close together, and I was getting a little bit more serious, I guess. And he's like, yeah, I think it's time we better go in. So we got everything together again, and I told the midwife, I'm like, all right, we're coming back in. We'll see what happens. On the way back, my contractions were very difficult to manage in the truck. We got back in there, and I was like, oh, please let me be progressed, because I do not know, like I said, what I'm going to do if this isn't labor. Like, I don't know how I'm going to handle real labor contractions. So she checked me, and she's like, well, you're at a 7, so you're going to stay. And I was like, okay, like, I don't know. I was so surreal. And when she left, I asked my husband, I'm like, so that means like I'm in labor, like we're gonna have the baby? And he's like, yeah. It just was like weird being stalled at a 5 all day long, and then all of a sudden I was at a 7, and now I'm gonna have the baby. It was weird, but it was great. So 6:15, I had got back to the birth center, and that's when I was at a 7. Contractions were still like every 2 minutes apart, a minute long, but they were so manageable. It was way more painful than my daughter's, but it was very easy to cope with them, if that makes sense. I think I had a lot more like tools in my tool belt to cope with the pain and intensity of them, and just the environment. It was beautiful. I mainly spent the remainder of my labor leaning over the couch, or leaning over the bed, or on hands and knees on the bed, because that's like the only way I could manage my contractions. I had a lot of back labor this time, which I didn't really experience with my first, and that is no joke. I didn't know it at the time, but thinking back on my labor and birth and everything, I think I began to hit transition around 8 p.m. I was getting the shakes, I was getting hot cold flashes. Then my thoughts had started to look more like, how much longer will I be in this stage? I was getting tired. And the main thing that makes me think I was in transition is because I wasn't getting breaks in between my contractions. They were coming back to back to back. I was unable to focus on anything else. The midwife and nurse ended up coming in the room and staying there at this point. I think they also caught on that I was probably in transition. And I was just sitting on the edge of the bed, like clinging to my husband, and I was still very calm and in control, which I'm so thankful for, because that's what my main goal was, to stay calm and laid back and just relaxed. So I was just sitting on the edge of the bed, and I was like just praying and singing praises to God and clinging to my husband, and I did not focus on anything else. I was literally not even focusing on contractions at this point. I was focusing on, I was built to do this. God made my body amazing. God made my body to do this miraculous thing. And I know that if I can't do it, He will carry me through. And that's all I was thinking about. Throughout the whole labor up to this point, it was focusing on my contractions and focusing on the pain and like it bringing my baby down. This point was, I had reached my point where my job was now to rely on God and my body doing the work. And so that's how I got through transition, and it was actually a very peaceful transition. It was hard and intense, don't get me wrong. Getting no breaks in between was, that was something I did not expect, because that didn't happen to me before. But it was really tough. I would get probably like 5 contractions, and then I'd get a 30-second break maybe, which the 30-second break seemed like a long time compared to the 5 minutes of straight contractions. So my husband and the midwife really encouraged me to get in the water, because I had said I wanted to try and labor in the water and possibly have a water birth to reduce my risk of tearing again. I did not want to leave the bed though. I was actually like very comfortable in the bed, for as comfortable as I could be, but they both really encouraged me to get in the tub. And the thing is, at this point, I thought I still had a long way to go, and I didn't want to get in the tub too early and have it like slow things down, or I didn't want to get in the tub and have my relief come before I needed it. So like I wanted it to be at my most painful, intense part of labor. But then when I realized they were like getting everything ready in the room, that I should probably get in the tub soon. So another thing I didn't realize was how scared I was to push the baby out. I totally did not understand where my like trauma had come from, but that is where it came from, was the pushing stage, because I knew that if I got in that tub, things would probably pick up because I was in transition and I would be pushing soon. And I thought to myself, I'm not pushing this baby out. I'm not doing that. Like, I was genuinely really scared. And it never clicked until I had those thoughts in labor. Just because I was so scared of tearing again. It has been a very life-changing injury. I was very scared of it happening the same or worse again. So I was like, you know what? I don't have an option. The baby is going to come out sooner or later, and I may as well get in the tub and get, you know, the water to help soak and the water to help take away some of the intensity and pain. And I got in the tub, and they say sometimes after transition you'll get a little break, like contractions will stop or slow, and the mom will kind of go into this rest period before her body starts pushing. And I got in the tub, and I, again, didn't realize this was happening until I look back on my birth story. But I got in the tub, and for like probably 10-15 minutes, I was just chilling. Like, I was getting contractions, but they weren't nearly as strong as they were on the bed. And I got a little bit scared because I was like, oh no, like, did I just stall my labor by getting in the tub? But I think what happened is I was already fully dilated to a 10 and I just wasn't ready to push yet because I got in the tub, and when they stopped, I had like a very, like, I just had a moment to breathe and a moment to mentally prepare myself for what was to come. And I do think that I was probably fully dilated at that point. My water hadn't broke up to this point. So then after about 15-20 minutes, I don't really know, time was like, I didn't look at the clock at all. So I think it was probably 10-15 minutes after I got in the tub that my contractions started to get like really intense again. They were much more manageable because the water helped me. It really helps a lot. If you're like contemplating a water birth, it really does help the intensity of your contractions a lot, and you're more like floaty, like you're free to move in different positions that are easier to get into in the water, if that makes sense. My midwife said that I could do a cervical check and they could break my water if I wanted to, because I'd been in that transition stage for like an hour, and then I was in like the pushing, like preliminary stages for an hour. I wanted my water broke because I knew that would help her come quicker. So they did break my water and I was at a 10, which I already kind of knew because I was already sort of pushing. But once my water broke, then the contractions were like pushing contractions. Like I had to push, and I was still really scared to push the baby out. Like I could tell my body was just holding back a lot. I also don't have very good mind-muscle connection from the tear. Like the trauma of it kind of disconnected those, I don't even know what to call it, nerve endings or something, that I can't really like tell my body to bear down much, which is just one of the complications that I have from that. But anyways, it was hard to like figure out how to push. And so the whole time I was actually feeling baby's head with my hand. If that's TMI, sorry, but this is a birth video, so. But it helped me a lot. I could feel her ready to be born, and that helped me a lot. And the midwife was like, keep doing that. It's helping you push, and like, just think about delivering her into your arms. So I kept doing that, and I also had the midwife do a warm compress to help from tearing, and I was trying so hard to be super controlled and not just like push her out, because I knew that I needed to give my body time to expand and allow her to pass through without tearing right through my tear again. And so they just really encouraged me to do whatever my body was doing, and they would help me, you know, like, okay, push, like push, and then take a rest. And it was a very calm, relaxed pushing experience. It was very self-led, but also with encouragement from the midwife and nurse. I ended up on my hands and knees from advice from my midwife to kind of push into the ground, like use my knees as leverage, which really helped. When I got into that position, she came probably within like 15-20 minutes. But I was being very, very vocal, which I did not expect. I did not like making noise with my first. I felt very like I was out of control of my body when I was making like kind of yelling-ish, moaning noises. This time, however, I kept telling my husband like a few days after birth that I made so much loud noise and like kind of yelling and screaming, but it was never out of a place of fear like it was with my first. It was out of pure like power, like my body just did it. And I would get done with the contraction and I would look at the midwives and I'm like, I'm really sorry, like I don't know where this is coming from. It totally felt like there was like something else inside of me doing it. And then I would get done and I'm like, what the heck was that? Like, who is this woman? And it just came from a place of pure bodily power, and it was needed to bring the baby here, which is so crazy. I did not want to make any noise this time because I hated making noise with my first, but it was so different because that was like, I felt out of control and I felt, you know, just panicky. But this time I felt very in control, and I was like, my body is doing exactly what it has to do to bring my baby here. And it was amazing. She was about to come out and I was like, I cannot push her out on this one because I'm going to tear if I push her out on this one. So I waited it out, which was super tough, but I was just doing the like breathing, you know, like you see in movies sort of. And I waited for the next one, and I knew it. I was like, I'm going to push her out on this one. So I pushed her. So she came out, and it wasn't like at the hospital where the head comes out and they like pull the rest of the body. It was like, okay, now take a breath and slowly push out the rest of the body when it feels comfortable for you. So it was so strange to see her head just like in the water. Like she was born but not born, because her body was still not born and she was still in the water. It was so surreal. And then when the rest of her came out, they had me leave her underwater because her cord was wrapped around her neck, which they handled flawlessly and just without panic at all, which thank goodness, because if they panicked, I would have panicked. And the thing is, I thought the midwife said, okay, like bring her up. So I like brought her up out of the water. I think it was sort of just like instinct, like bring your baby to you, you know? But they're like, oh, not yet, because the cord was still around her neck. And you know, when they come out of the water, they have to breathe real oxygen rather than just through the umbilical cord giving them oxygen. So that was a little bit of a dilemma, because now she had the cord around her neck and she was above air. So I was like lifting my hips up, and we were trying to keep her above the water while also trying to get the cord off around her neck. Luckily, they just handled it very smoothly, even though I did what I was not supposed to do because I misunderstood what she was saying. But they got it off her neck. It was fine. It was very quick. Like when I watched back the footage, it was so quick. Like you wouldn't even know what was going on unless you were in the situation. And it was never like a panic, which thank goodness. So yeah, but I ended up catching the baby, which was unplanned, but I'm so thankful I got to do that. And then when they put her on my chest, it was like, oh my gosh, like what? I can't believe I just did that. Just making final edits, and I realized that I didn't even mention when I started pushing or when the baby was born or anything, which is like, Hazel's laughing at me, which is like one of the main things that I like to know in birth stories. So I started pushing around 10, I think. Like I said, I didn't look at the clock much. And then she was born at 10:55, so it was about an hour of pushing. Sorry about that. So when her head came out, I felt her shoulders in the back. And I actually said this. I was like, oh, shoot. And I felt it tear back again. And I was like, oh, crap. Like, I didn't do it controlled enough, and I tore a 4th degree again. I totally thought that's what happened. And so when I did finally get her on my chest, I wanted to get out ASAP because I thought I had a 4th degree tear, and the pool was kind of filling up with blood, and I was very uncomfortable seeing that happen. And I was like, did I tear? Because I definitely thought I did. And they're like, we can't tell yet, you're still in the water. And obviously now looking back, that was a dumb question, because how would they tell if I tore while I'm in the tub? So I did end up getting out really quick because I kept telling them, like, I want to get out of the tub. So I finally got out to the bed, and I delivered the placenta on the bed and everything because they don't like to do it in the water there, just to monitor bleeding and stuff. And then they checked if I tore, and this was my second main goal, was to tear less than a 4th degree tear. And she said, oh, you only got a 2nd. And I felt relief just like fly off my shoulders. And even as she was examining just the tear and stuff, she's like, actually, it barely went into your muscle, so it's like barely a 2nd degree. And I was like, oh my goodness. I couldn't believe it. I definitely thought that I had a 4th degree tear again based on how her shoulders felt when they were coming out. It was crazy, and I'm so thankful. I'll be 2 weeks postpartum tomorrow, and I feel back to normal pretty much. Like, I cannot believe it. After they cleaned me up and stitched me up and everything on the bed, they asked me, like, how are you doing? And I was walking, and I just like stopped, and I had this sudden realization. I was like, I can walk. Like, I cannot believe I can walk after I just had a baby. Because with my first, I couldn't walk for days, like without assistance or very, very slowly, and it was excruciatingly painful. This time I could walk, and I was like sore a little bit, like I just gave birth obviously, but it was it was crazy, and I felt so thankful, and I just kept telling the midwife, I can't believe I can walk, and I still can't believe my experience healing now. I can do daily tasks, I can take care of my toddler and my newborn. My mental state is incredibly different than it was with my first. I am not crying every day, I'm not feeling hopeless, and I didn't realize how awful my postpartum period was with my first compared to how it is now. It's insane, and I wish I would have reached out for help with my first, because the way that I feel now, I'm shocked that it's possible to feel this good after having a baby, and I just can't even say how grateful I am. And it's everything I prayed for, and I know so many of you and my family were praying for me too, to have a healing birth experience and not tear again. And I'm just, praise the Lord that I only got a small 2nd-degree tear, and praise the Lord for a wonderful, healthy labor and delivery and healthy baby. And I'm just really thankful, and I hope that this can be an encouragement to someone out there who has had a traumatic birth or traumatic birth injury, or just is scared of labor. Like I said, it was more painful, but it was so empowering. It's definitely mind over matter. Obviously there's there is situations, but I just want to encourage someone. This was a dream healing birth experience, and I'm very thankful I got to experience this birth. I'm so thankful to the birth center for all that they did for me, and how comfortable they made me feel and confident they were in my ability to follow my body's natural, course of action. I had such an amazing experience. But I do want to say also, though my first birth was not how I had envisioned it, I'm still so thankful for that experience. I would do that birth experience all over again for my daughter, and it has really helped me grow a lot in myself as a person. It's made me go through more trials than I expected, but I'm very thankful for it, and I'm thankful also for this birth, that it was a healing experience for me mentally and physically, and that I can spend time with both my babies as a happy mom who's able to take care of them without breaking down all the time. But I hope that I explained this birth experience well. If you have any questions about a water birth or a birth center birth, I'd be happy to answer them on Instagram or in the comments, or if you want me to do a whole Q&A video about water birth, I can probably do that too. But yeah, I hope I explained it well. I hope it was an encouragement to you if you're wanting to do an unmedicated labor and delivery, or, just an encouragement for, she's getting a little upset, or just an encouragement for labor and delivery in general, no matter which way you give birth. So I just want to say, I'm going to pick up my baby. So I just want to say thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for all of your kind messages and comments about our baby and the congratulations and everything. I also want to give just a very big, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for following along on this pregnancy and wishing me luck, praying for me, praying for us. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate every single one of you. And yeah, that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and maybe I'll see you back next time. Bye!